I gave up my job and everything for him, but he undermined me, betrayed me, and I finally chose divorce. The rain had stopped just moments before Amelia stepped out of the office building, carrying a small cardboard box. Inside were the last pieces of a life she had spent nearly 12 years building: family photographs, a ceramic coffee mug with the words "Dream Big," a leather notebook filled with ideas she had never had the chance to finish, and a silver plaque engraved with Employee of the Year. She stood on the sidewalk staring at the glass building behind her. For years she had walked through those revolving doors believing she was becoming the woman she was meant to be. She had climbed from intern to senior project manager before turning 35. People respected her. They sought her advice. They trusted her judgment. Today she had willingly handed in her resignation. Not because she wanted to, because she believed love sometimes required sacrifice. A car pulled up beside her. Daniel leaned over from the driver's seat, smiling. "There she is," he said warmly. "My brave wife." She smiled back, though something inside her tightened. He hurried around the car and took the box from her hands. "You don't need to carry this anymore. I can manage." "I know you can," he laughed. "But you don't have to. That's the whole point." Those words settled into her heart. She wanted to believe them. She really did. 3 years earlier, their first meeting had felt like fate. Amelia had been presenting a proposal to a company considering a partnership. Halfway through her presentation, a man sitting near the back interrupted, not rudely, but confidently. "What happens if market conditions change halfway through implementation?" She smiled. "Then we adapt." "How?" She answered every question without looking at her notes. When the meeting ended, he approached her. "I'm Daniel. Amelia. You handled my questions well. You asked good ones. I was trying to make you nervous. You failed." He laughed harder than she expected. "So, would you let me buy you dinner as a consolation prize for trying?" She hesitated, then nodded. That dinner lasted nearly 5 hours. They talked about dreams instead of weather, books instead of celebrities, purpose instead of money. For the first time in years, Amelia met someone who seemed to understand her. Daniel had dreams of starting his own consulting company. "I don't want to spend my whole life making someone else rich," he said. She admired his ambition. "You'll do it." "You really think so?" "I know so." He looked at her as though no one had ever believed in him before. That look would stay with her for years. Their relationship moved quickly. Within 18 months they were married. Their apartment wasn't large. The furniture didn't match. Sometimes they ate pasta 4 nights a week because money was tight. But they laughed constantly. Daniel would dance with her while dinner burned. He'd kiss flour off her nose. He'd whisper, "We're building something together." Those words became their promise. Not mine, not yours, ours. One evening, Daniel came home unusually quiet. He dropped his briefcase by the door. "I think today changed everything." Amelia looked up from the laptop balanced on her knees. "What happened?" "They offered me a promotion." Her face lit up. "Daniel." "But..." She recognized that word. "But?" "It means longer hours." She nodded. "More travel." She nodded again. "And if I accept..." He stopped. "What?" "I'll never have time to build my own business." Silence filled the room. Amelia slowly closed her laptop. "What if you didn't take it?" "I can't turn down the money." "What if there was another way?" He frowned. "What are you thinking?" She didn't answer immediately. The idea scared her. But love often asks impossible questions. "My salary is enough for us." Daniel stared at her. "If one of us focused completely on building the business..." His eyes widened. "You mean me?" She smiled. "You've dreamed about this for years. I can't ask you to support us." "You're not asking." His voice cracked. "You'd really do that?" She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. We're building something together. He repeated the words softly. Together. 6 months later, Daniel registered his company. The first months were difficult. Clients canceled. Invoices went unpaid. Savings disappeared faster than expected. Many nights Amelia worked late before coming home to help Daniel organize proposals and prepare presentations. Sometimes they stayed awake until 2 in the morning. She edited contracts. She built spreadsheets. She redesigned his website. She answered emails while he slept. She never complained. Whenever Daniel doubted himself, she reminded him why he started. You can do this. What if I fail? Then we'll try again. And again? And again. Eventually, the business began growing. 1 client became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became more than either of them imagined. Daniel couldn't stop smiling. I got another contract. She hugged him. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. She believed him. A year later, they welcomed their daughter, Lily. Holding their tiny baby, Daniel cried openly. I don't deserve this. Amelia kissed his forehead. You do. They promised each other that no matter how successful life became, family would always come first. Promises are easy to make when life is simple. Keeping them is something else entirely. The first crack appeared so quietly, Amelia almost ignored it. Daniel forgot their anniversary. Not just dinner. The entire day. He came home after 9 carrying his laptop. You won't believe the client I met today. She smiled patiently. I might. What do you mean? She pointed toward the dining table. 2 candles had burned themselves out. Cold dinner remained untouched. His smile disappeared. Oh, you forgot. I'm sorry. It's okay. No, really. He hugged her quickly. I'll make it up to you. She nodded. Life was busy. People forgot things, didn't they? Weeks later, he missed Lily's school performance. Again. I'm sorry. The meeting ran late. The client flew in unexpectedly. There wasn't any signal. Always another reason. Always believable. Always forgivable. At least at first. His phone became part of his hand. Breakfast. Phone. Dinner. Phone. Weekends. Phone. Vacations. Phone. If Amelia asked a question, his eyes rarely left the screen. What did you say? I wasn't listening. Small things. Tiny moments. Almost invisible. Yet together they slowly built a wall between them. One Saturday afternoon, Amelia found Daniel sitting alone on the patio. You've been out here an hour. I needed air. She sat beside him. You okay? I just have a lot on my mind. You can tell me. I know. But he didn't. Instead, he changed the subject. How's Lily doing with math? It was subtle. Almost effortless. He had become skilled at avoiding conversations. Months passed. Daniel's company moved into a larger office. He hired assistants, managers, consultants. His name started appearing in business magazines, interviews, podcasts. People praised him as a self-made entrepreneur. Each article used nearly identical words. He built his empire from nothing. Amelia smiled whenever she read them. Yet something about that sentence always lingered. From nothing. Had it really been nothing? She remembered the sleepless nights, the unpaid bills, the spreadsheets, the marketing plans, the contracts she had rewritten, the salary she had sacrificed. She reminded herself it didn't matter. They were one team. Recognition wasn't important. Love was. Or at least that's what she kept telling herself. One evening, Daniel hosted a celebration dinner after signing his biggest contract yet. The dining room overflowed with investors and executives. Laughter echoed through the house. Glasses clinked. Success filled every corner. Daniel stood to give a toast. I couldn't have achieved any of this without my incredible team. Everyone applauded. He thanked his business partners, his managers, his investors, even the receptionist. Amelia smiled proudly from across the room. Surely, he would mention her. Instead, he lifted his glass. To the future. Everyone cheered. The speech ended. That tiny smile froze on Amelia's face. No one noticed. Not even Daniel. For the first time since they met. She felt invisible. She quietly collected empty plates while the guests congratulated her husband on building everything by himself. As she carried the dishes into the kitchen, she caught two women talking just outside the doorway. I heard his wife doesn't work. Must be nice. I'd get bored doing nothing all day. Amelia stopped walking. Neither woman knew she could hear them. She looked down at her hands. They were rough from years of cooking, cleaning, raising Lily, managing the home, and quietly helping build a company whose success everyone credited to someone else. She wanted to step out and correct them. Instead, she quietly picked up another plate. Because sometimes the people who sacrifice the most are also the easiest to overlook. She didn't realize it then, but someone else in the dining room had been watching Daniel all evening. Not his clients, not his investors. A young woman with dark hair who laughed a little too hard at everything he said. Every time Daniel's phone buzzed, his eyes drifted toward her before he slipped the device back into his pocket. Amelia noticed the glance. Just for a second. Then it was gone. She told herself she was imagining things. After all, trust was the foundation of every marriage, wasn't it? Daniel slipped his phone back into his pocket, so naturally that anyone else would have missed it. Amelia forced herself to smile as another guest thanked her for hosting such a wonderful evening. She excused herself, carried another tray into the kitchen, and leaned against the counter for a moment. "Mom?" She turned to see Lily standing in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing one sleepy eye. "I can't sleep." Amelia immediately softened. "You should be in bed, sweetheart." "I wanted to say goodnight to Dad." Amelia glanced toward the dining room where Daniel was laughing with his guests. "I'll go get him." She walked back into the crowd and waited patiently until the conversation around Daniel paused. "Lily's awake. She wants to say goodnight." Daniel barely looked at her. "Can you do it? We're discussing tomorrow's presentation. It'll only take a minute." "I know, but this contract is worth millions." One of the investors chuckled. "Kids eventually understand." Daniel laughed with them. Amelia didn't. She nodded quietly and returned upstairs. Lily looked hopeful when she saw her mother. "Is Daddy coming?" Amelia brushed a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "He has an important meeting." Lily lowered her eyes. "He always has meetings." The words landed like stones. Amelia kissed her forehead. "He loves you very much." "I know." But the little girl's voice carried doubt that no child should have to feel. The guests finally left after midnight. The house was silent except for the dishwasher humming in the kitchen. Daniel loosened his tie and collapsed onto the couch. What a night. Amelia continued wiping the dining table. It was. "You seem quiet." "I'm tired." "You've barely said 2 words since dinner." She looked at him. "You thanked everyone tonight." He frowned. "I did. Everyone except me." He stared for several seconds before laughing awkwardly. "Seriously? I'm not trying to start a fight. It was a business dinner." "I know. So why are we talking about this?" She searched his face. "I just thought..." "What?" "You might mention the person who stood beside you before any of those people even knew your name." Daniel sighed heavily. "Amelia..." "No, forget it. You're overthinking. I probably am. You know how much I appreciate you." She wanted to believe him. Instead, something inside her whispered that appreciation sounded different from gratitude. The following weeks passed in a blur. Daniel left before sunrise, returned long after dinner. Sometimes he was already asleep before Amelia climbed into bed. Other nights he wasn't home at all. Client dinner, networking event, airport delays. The explanations always sounded reasonable, too reasonable. One Thursday afternoon, Amelia decided to surprise him with lunch. She packed his favorite homemade lasagna, picked up fresh bread from the bakery, and drove to his office. The receptionist smiled politely. "Good afternoon. I'm here to surprise my husband." "Oh?" The young woman hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "Of course." "I'm sorry. Mr. Carter left about 30 minutes ago." Amelia smiled. "That's strange. He had a lunch meeting." "With who?" The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "I'm not really supposed to." "It's all right." Before she could answer, another employee walked past. "They're probably already at Bellamy's." The receptionist shot him a warning look. He shrugged. "What?" Amelia thanked them both and walked back toward her car. Bellamy's was only 5 minutes away. She wasn't suspicious. Not yet. She simply wanted to eat lunch with her husband. When she entered the restaurant, soft piano music filled the room. She looked around. There, near the window, Daniel. He wasn't alone. Across from him sat the same dark-haired woman from the dinner party. They were laughing. Daniel reached across the table and brushed something from her sleeve. The gesture lasted only a second. Perfectly innocent. At least that's what Amelia tried to convince herself. She approached with a smile. "Well, this is a surprise." Daniel's expression changed instantly. Shock. Then discomfort. Then something she couldn't quite identify. "Amelia." The woman stood. "I didn't know your wife was coming." Daniel cleared his throat. "Amelia, this is Vanessa." Vanessa extended her hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you." "Finally?" Amelia shook it. "You've heard about me?" Vanessa smiled. "Daniel talks about his family all the time." Family. Not wife. Family. A tiny distinction. Yet somehow it echoed inside Amelia's mind. Daniel gestured toward the empty chair. "We're discussing a marketing proposal." Amelia nodded. "I brought you lunch." And she lifted the insulated bag. Daniel looked embarrassed. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Vanessa glanced between them. "I should probably leave." "No," Daniel said quickly. "We're almost done anyway." He looked at Amelia. "I'll eat your lasagna later." She smiled. "It'll get cold." "I'll microwave it." She placed the container on the table. "I won't interrupt." As she walked away, she caught a glimpse of Vanessa watching Daniel. There was admiration in her eyes, or maybe something more. Outside the restaurant, Amelia sat in her car for nearly 10 minutes without turning the engine on. She wasn't angry. She wasn't jealous. She was uneasy, because Daniel hadn't looked happy to see her. He had looked caught. That evening she mentioned Vanessa casually. "So, your marketing consultant seems nice." Daniel didn't look up from his laptop. "Who?" "Vanessa." "Oh," he continued typing. "What about her?" "Nothing." Silence. "You two seem to work closely." "It's business." "I didn't say it wasn't." He closed the laptop harder than necessary. "Where is this coming from?" "It isn't coming from anywhere. You've never questioned who I meet with before." "I'm not questioning." "It sounds like questioning." She sighed. "I only met her today. And I was making conversation." Daniel stood. "I'm exhausted. So am I. I don't have the energy for imaginary problems." Imaginary. That word lingered after he walked upstairs. Amelia remained at the dining table long after the house fell silent. She replayed the afternoon again and again. Had she imagined his expression? Had she imagined the tension, Or was she beginning to see something that had always been there? Sunday lunch at Daniel's parents' house had once been Amelia's favorite tradition. Now she dreaded it. The moment they arrived, Daniel's mother greeted her son with an enormous hug. "My successful boy!" His father clapped him proudly on the back. "I saw another interview online." Daniel smiled. "Business is going well." "It certainly is." Then his mother's attention shifted toward Amelia. "And how are you keeping yourself busy these days?" Amelia smiled politely. "Lily keeps me busy." "Oh, of course." There was a pause. It must be nice not having to work. The table grew quiet. Amelia answered calmly, "Looking after a home is work." Her mother-in-law laughed softly. "You know what I mean." Before Amelia could respond, Daniel spoke. "Mom?" "What?" "Let's eat." The subject changed, but no one defended Amelia, not even her husband. Later that afternoon, while helping clear the dishes, Amelia overheard Daniel's sister whispering to their mother, "I don't know how he does it." "Does what?" "Carries the whole family by himself." They both laughed. Amelia stood frozen behind the pantry door. Carries the whole family. If only they knew who had carried the weight before anyone believed in Daniel. She quietly picked up another stack of plates and said nothing. Because sometimes silence feels easier than reminding people of sacrifices they've already chosen to forget. As she loaded the dishwasher, she noticed Daniel's phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up for just a moment. One message. No name, just a heart emoji. Before she could read anything else, Daniel hurried into the kitchen, snatched up the phone, and slipped it into his pocket. Their eyes met. For a split second, neither of them spoke. Then he forced a smile. "Ready to go home?" Amelia smiled back, but for the first time in their marriage, she wasn't sure she knew the man standing in front of her. The drive home was unusually quiet. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window, clutching the stuffed rabbit Amelia had sewn for her years earlier. The little girl's soft breathing was the only sound inside the car. Daniel kept both hands on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. Amelia watched the streetlights blur past. Normally, one of them would fill the silence with stories about Lily's latest adventure at school or laugh about something ridiculous that had happened during the week. Tonight, silence felt like a third passenger. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You've barely said a word." "I'm thinking." "About what?" She hesitated. "The message." His jaw tightened. "What message?" "The one on your phone." It was work. "Work sends heart emojis now?" Daniel let out an impatient breath. "Not every heart means romance." "I didn't say it did. You were thinking it." "I was wondering." He shook his head. "This is exactly why I didn't want to have this conversation." "What conversation?" "The one where my wife suddenly stops trusting me." She looked out the window. "I haven't stopped trusting you." "Then act like it." Those words stung more than she expected, because trust wasn't something she had withdrawn. It was something she could feel slipping away on its own. The following Monday began like every other. Daniel left before sunrise. Amelia packed Lily's lunch, braided her hair, and drove her to school. When she returned home, she stood in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by a spotless house. Everything was clean. Everything was organized. Everything was quiet. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at the dining table. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to ask a question she had avoided. Who am I now? Once, she had managed multi-million rand projects. She had led teams, solved impossible problems, negotiated contracts. Now, entire days passed without another adult speaking to her. She loved being Lily's mother. She didn't regret that. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror. She opened the drawer beside the table and found an old leather notebook. Her notebook. Inside were ideas she'd written years ago, business plans, leadership notes, project strategies, sketches for a consulting firm she'd once dreamed of starting herself. She smiled sadly. I used to be ambitious. A small voice inside her corrected the thought. You still are. You've just forgotten. That afternoon, her phone rang. Amelia? She immediately recognized the voice. Sophia. Her former colleague laughed. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about us. Never. We're having lunch on Friday. Everyone's coming. I don't know. No excuses. Amelia smiled. It's been years. Exactly why you need to come. She looked around the silent house. I'll be there. Friday arrived. As Amelia walked into the cafe, conversation stopped. Then smiles spread across familiar faces. Amelia! She barely had time to set down her handbag before she was surrounded by hugs. You haven't changed. We've missed you. You look amazing. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. They spent hours catching up. Stories flowed effortlessly. Projects, families, life. Eventually, Sophia leaned forward. You know. What? We've tried replacing you 3 times. Amelia laughed. I'm sure you managed. I'm serious. No one organized chaos the way you did. Another colleague nodded. The company still talks about your negotiation with the Pretoria contract. I can't believe you remember that. Remember? Sophia grinned. It's practically office legend. Amelia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not because she wanted praise, but because someone remembered who she used to be. So, Sophia said carefully, have you ever thought about coming back? Amelia hesitated. I don't know. You'd have offers tomorrow. I've been away a long time. Talent doesn't disappear. The words echoed in her mind long after lunch ended. Talent doesn't disappear. That evening she mentioned it casually while Daniel checked emails. I had lunch with my old team today. That's nice. They asked if I'd ever consider working again. Daniel didn't look up. You don't need to. I know. So why are we discussing it? It was just conversation. He continued typing. Lily needs stability. I know. Our schedules work because you're home. I know. My business is expanding. I know. He finally looked at her. Then what's the issue? There isn't one. He nodded and returned to his laptop. Conversation over. It struck Amelia that he hadn't once asked whether she wanted to work again. Not once. Only whether the household would continue functioning around his life. A week later, Daniel announced exciting news over breakfast. We're hosting an executive retreat. That's wonderful. It's at the coastal resort. For how long? 4 days. Lily will miss you. I'll make it up to her. He smiled. And spouses are invited to the closing dinner. Really? Of course. She felt a flicker of excitement. Maybe this was exactly what they needed. Time together. Away from everything. Away from business. Away from the growing distance between them. The resort overlooked the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks below while executives mingled on the terrace. Amelia wore the navy blue dress Daniel had once said was his favorite. As they entered the ballroom, several people greeted Daniel immediately. Daniel! Congratulations on the expansion. Brilliant presentation. He disappeared into the crowd. Amelia smiled politely as strangers introduced themselves. She looked across the room. There was Vanessa. Elegant, confident, standing only a few steps from Daniel. Their conversation looked effortless. Too effortless. Then Amelia noticed something strange. Vanessa laughed. Without thinking, she lightly touched Daniel's arm. Not for long, barely a second. Yet Daniel didn't move away. Instead, he smiled in a way Amelia hadn't seen in months. Warm, relaxed, alive. The smile he'd once reserved for her. Something tightened in her chest. A waiter approached with drinks. "Champagne, ma'am?" She accepted one, though she suddenly had no desire to celebrate. Across the room, Vanessa leaned closer to Daniel and whispered something. He laughed. A genuine laugh. Amelia couldn't remember the last time she'd been the reason for that sound. She looked down at her glass. For the first time, jealousy wasn't what she felt. It was grief. Grief for a marriage that seemed to be slipping away while she was still desperately trying to hold on. Just then, Daniel glanced across the ballroom. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, guilt flashed across his face. Then it vanished. He raised his glass toward her with a polite smile, the kind of smile a businessman gives an acquaintance. Not the woman who had once given up everything to build his dream. Amelia forced herself to return the smile. It was practiced, polite, empty. She lifted her glass just enough to acknowledge him, then looked away before anyone could notice the sting in her eyes. The ballroom buzzed with conversation. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished marble floors, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Everyone seemed to be celebrating success. Everyone except her. She wandered toward the terrace overlooking the ocean. The cool evening breeze wrapped around her shoulders, carrying the scent of salt water. For a few precious moments, she allowed herself to breathe. "Mind if I join you?" She turned to find an older gentleman, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I'm Richard," she smiled politely. "Amelia." "I know." She looked surprised. "You've been married to Daniel since before his company existed. You know my husband?" Richard chuckled. "We've done business together for years." He handed her one of the coffees. "I noticed you escaped the party. So did you. I've attended enough corporate celebrations to know they're all the same." She laughed quietly. It felt good to laugh. Richard leaned against the railing. "You know, Daniel talks about growth constantly. He does. But there's something he never talks about." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The people who helped him get there." Amelia stayed silent. "I remember when he first pitched his company." Her heart skipped. "You were there?" "I invested very early." She nodded. "I remember." "You probably don't remember me." "I remember everyone." He smiled warmly. "Then you remember who answered most of the difficult questions." Amelia looked down at her coffee. "I only helped a little." Richard laughed. "That's not how I remember it." Several years earlier, Daniel had been terrified before meeting his first potential investors. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I can't do this." Amelia adjusted his tie. "You've prepared for months." "What if they ask something I can't answer?" "They probably will." "That doesn't help." She smiled. "Then I'll answer." He laughed nervously. "You always save me." "We save each other." During the meeting, exactly as Daniel feared, the investors had asked difficult questions. Cash flow, risk management, expansion strategies, legal exposure. Daniel stumbled. Amelia calmly explained every concern with confidence and clarity. Afterward, one investor had quietly said to another, "She's the strategist." Daniel had heard it. So had Amelia. Neither of them mentioned it again. Richard's voice pulled her back to the present. "You have a remarkable mind." She blinked. "Thank you. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Something about his words unsettled her, not because they were kind, because she couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to her that way. "You seem thoughtful," Richard said. "I've just been out of the professional world for a long time." He smiled. "Talent doesn't expire." She stared at the ocean. Why had 2 different people told her the same thing in the same week? Inside the ballroom, Daniel noticed Amelia speaking with Richard. His expression darkened. When Amelia returned, he intercepted her before she reached the table. "What were you talking about?" She frowned. "Coffee." "For 40 minutes?" "We talked." Daniel lowered his voice. "Richard is one of our biggest investors." "I know. So? So I'd appreciate it if you didn't corner important clients." She stared at him. "Corner? I just mean—" "No, Daniel." She held his gaze. "You said corner. I chose the wrong word. Did I embarrass you?" He sighed. "Can we not do this here?" She felt something crack inside her. Not loudly, quietly, like glass splintering beneath invisible pressure. "I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I know. But people notice these things." "What things?" "When spouses become overly involved." Overly involved. The words echoed painfully. She remembered the nights she'd stayed awake, proofreading contracts. The weekends she'd spent designing presentations. The savings she'd poured into his dream. Overly involved. She nodded once. "I understand." But she didn't. Not anymore. The next morning, Amelia woke before sunrise. Unable to sleep, she wandered through the nearly empty hotel lobby. She ordered tea and found a seat near the windows. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Couldn't sleep either?" It was Vanessa. Amelia forced a smile. "I suppose not." Vanessa sat across from her. "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all." For several moments, neither woman spoke. Then Vanessa smiled. "You must be very proud of Daniel." "I am. He's brilliant. He works hard." Vanessa nodded enthusiastically. "He deserves everything he's achieved." Amelia smiled politely. "Yes." Then Vanessa added something that caught her completely off guard. "He says you're the reason he learned discipline." Amelia looked up. "He said that?" Vanessa laughed. "All the time." A strange mixture of relief and confusion washed over Amelia. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe Daniel did appreciate her. Maybe he simply struggled to show it. "I've always admired your marriage," Vanessa continued. Amelia's shoulders relaxed. "Really? It's rare to see someone support a husband the way you have." Those words warmed her heart. Perhaps she'd misjudged everything. Perhaps the distance between them could still be repaired. Just then, Vanessa's phone vibrated. She glanced down at the screen. For only a fraction of a second, Amelia saw the wallpaper. It was a photograph taken at the company retreat. Daniel stood in the foreground, smiling. Vanessa had cropped everyone else out. Only Daniel remained. Vanessa quickly locked the screen. "I'm sorry." "No problem." But Amelia's heartbeat had begun to quicken. Why would an employee have a photograph of her boss as her phone wallpaper? Coincidence? Admiration? Or something far more dangerous? Before Amelia could think further, Daniel entered the lobby. His eyes moved immediately to Vanessa, then to Amelia. He looked startled. "Morning." Vanessa stood quickly. "I should get to the conference room." She hurried away. Daniel watched her leave before turning back to his wife. "What were you two talking about?" Amelia studied his face carefully. "Nothing important." For the first time in their marriage, she chose not to tell him the truth. Not because she wanted secrets, but because she suddenly realized she was the only one who had never kept any. Daniel studied her for another moment. "Nothing important?" he repeated. She met his eyes evenly. "Just small talk." He nodded, but there was an uneasiness in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Good," he said. "Vanessa is new to the executive team. I don't want her feeling uncomfortable." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "You seem very concerned about her comfort." "It's my responsibility." "Of course." He glanced at his watch. "I have to get to the conference." Without another word, he walked away. Amelia remained seated, watching him disappear through the lobby doors. It wasn't what he'd said that bothered her. It was how quickly he'd defended Vanessa. When they returned home from the retreat, life resumed its familiar rhythm. Daniel buried himself in work. Lily returned to school. Amelia returned to a spotless house that somehow felt emptier than ever. One Tuesday morning, she opened the hallway closet to look for an old photo album. A storage box slipped from the top shelf and spilled across the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. Old greeting cards. Receipts. Business plans. Then she noticed a thick blue folder. She picked it up. Across the front, in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "Original business proposal." Curious, she opened it. Inside were the very first documents they'd created together. She smiled as memories flooded back. There was the logo she'd designed, the pricing model she'd spent an entire weekend calculating, the financial forecast she'd built from scratch. Even handwritten notes in the margins. Her handwriting, not Daniel's. She turned another page. Another. Then another. Almost every major revision had been written by her. She sat down on the floor. She had forgotten. Not forgotten because she wanted to. Forgotten because she'd spent so many years letting everyone, including herself, believe that Daniel had built everything alone. She closed the folder gently. "I wasn't just supporting him." She whispered the words aloud. "I helped build this." For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she'd spent years minimizing. That evening, Daniel came home unusually cheerful. "I have good news." Amelia looked up from the kitchen. "What happened?" "We landed the international contract." "That's wonderful." "It changes everything." He kissed her forehead absent-mindedly as he walked toward the dining room. "We're expanding overseas." She smiled. "I'm happy for you." "You should be." He laughed. "Looks like all the sacrifices paid off." Something about the sentence felt strange. Not our sacrifices. The sacrifices. As though they belonged to the past. As though they belonged to no one. She carried dinner to the table. Halfway through the meal, Daniel's phone vibrated. He glanced down. A smile appeared before he quickly erased it. "Everything okay?" Amelia asked. "Just work." His phone vibrated again. Then again. He picked it up. "I have to answer this." He left the table. From the hallway, she heard him lower his voice. "No." A pause. "I told you not now." Another pause. "I'll call you later." He returned a minute later. "Sorry. Emergency." Something like that. Lily looked up innocently. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Why do you always whisper when work calls?" Daniel froze. Children noticed everything. He forced a laugh. "So I don't disturb dinner." Lily seemed satisfied. Amelia wasn't. A few days later, Amelia stopped by the supermarket after dropping Lily at school. As she reached for a loaf of bread, someone called her name. "Amelia?" She turned. At first, she didn't recognize the woman. Then her face lit up. "Mrs. Henderson." Her former university professor embraced her warmly. "I heard you got married." "I did." "And your career? Last I heard, you were becoming one of the brightest project managers in the industry." Amelia hesitated. "I left." Mrs. Henderson looked genuinely surprised. "You left completely?" "I wanted to support my family." There was a long silence. Finally, the older woman smiled gently. "I've always admired women who choose their families." Amelia relaxed. "But," her professor continued, "I hope you didn't abandon yourself in the process." The words landed heavily. "I don't think I have." "Good." Mrs. Henderson squeezed her hand. "Because the world still needs the woman who graduated at the top of my class." After they parted ways, Amelia sat in her parked car without starting the engine. How many people were going to remind her who she'd once been? And why had she stopped reminding herself? That night, Unable to sleep, she opened her old laptop. It took nearly 15 minutes to update. She smiled as forgotten folders appeared on the screen. Project portfolios, leadership certificates, professional recommendations, awards. Then she found a folder titled Ideas. Inside were dozens of unfinished business concepts. One document caught her attention: independent consulting practice. She opened it. As she read through the proposal, she couldn't help laughing softly. I actually planned all this. It was detailed, professional, viable. She had mapped out an entire business years before Daniel had launched his. A strange thought crossed her mind. What if? She closed the laptop immediately. No, that chapter of her life was over. Wasn't it? The following Friday, Daniel hosted another dinner at their house. This one was smaller. Only senior executives. Amelia greeted everyone warmly. Then Vanessa arrived. She carried a bottle of wine. Thank you for inviting me. Daniel smiled. I'm glad you could make it. Amelia noticed something subtle. Vanessa already knew where everything was. She walked straight into the kitchen without asking. She knew where the glasses were, the wine opener, even the serving trays. Amelia frowned. How? This was only the second time she'd visited. Or was it? Throughout dinner, Vanessa and Daniel finished each other's sentences, shared inside jokes, referenced meetings Amelia had never heard about. It could all be perfectly innocent. Except, near the end of the evening, Lily ran into the dining room carrying a drawing. Daddy, look what I made. Daniel barely glanced up. That's nice, sweetheart. He returned to his conversation with Vanessa. Lily's smile faded. She slowly walked over to Amelia instead. Mommy? Yes? Can you look? Amelia smiled brightly. It's beautiful. Lily whispered so quietly that almost no one could hear. I wish Daddy looked at me the way he looks at his work. Amelia hugged her tightly. But across the room, she realized Daniel wasn't looking at his work. He was looking at Vanessa, and Vanessa was looking right back at him. For the first time, Amelia no longer wondered if something was wrong. She began wondering how long it had been happening. Amelia lay awake long after everyone else had gone to sleep. Daniel was beside her, breathing steadily, one arm stretched across his side of the bed. There had been a time when she found comfort in the sound of his breathing. Now it only reminded her how differently they seemed to sleep. He rested peacefully. She lay awake with questions. She replayed the evening in her mind, Vanessa knowing where the serving trays were. The effortless conversation, the lingering glances, Lily's quiet disappointment. Perhaps each moment meant nothing on its own, but together, they formed a picture Amelia could no longer ignore. She quietly slipped out of bed and walked downstairs. The kitchen was spotless again. As always, she poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, staring into the darkness outside. When did we become strangers? She whispered. No answer came. The next morning, Daniel was already dressed when Amelia came downstairs. I'll be home late, he said, grabbing his car keys. Another client dinner? He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Yes. She noticed it. The hesitation. It was small, but it hadn't been there before. What client? He looked at her. Since when do I have to explain every meeting? I was just asking. And I already answered. He kissed Lily goodbye, gave Amelia a quick peck on the cheek, and walked out the door. The front door closed. A few seconds later, she heard his car pull away. Lily looked up from her cereal. Mom? Yes? Are you and Daddy fighting? Amelia forced a smile. No, sweetheart. You don't smile with your eyes anymore. The spoon slipped from Amelia's hand. Children really did notice everything. That afternoon, Amelia decided to do something she hadn't done in years. She drove to the public library. Not because she needed a book, because she needed silence. She wandered through the business section, almost absent-mindedly, until a title caught her eye. Starting again at any age. She smiled. What an optimistic title. She checked it out along with two others on entrepreneurship and leadership. The librarian handed her the books. Planning something exciting? Amelia laughed. I'm not sure yet. As she walked toward the parking lot, her phone rang. It was Sophia. I have a question. I'm listening. Our regional director is looking for a consultant. Amelia smiled. I told you, I'm not looking. Hear me out. I'm hearing. It's temporary. I've been away for years. You haven't forgotten how to solve problems. Amelia leaned against her car. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Sophia laughed. You'd begin exactly where you always did. Where? By asking better questions than everyone else. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes. When the call ended, Amelia found herself smiling. Not because she'd accepted anything, but because someone still believed she had something valuable to offer. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel sat in his office staring at his computer screen. He wasn't reading the report in front of him. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Vanessa stepped inside. You wanted to see me? He closed the office door. We need to be more careful. Her smile disappeared. Did something happen? Amelia is starting to notice. Vanessa folded her arms. Eventually she was going to. I know. So what's the plan? Daniel rubbed his forehead. I don't know. You can't keep living two lives forever. He didn't answer. Vanessa walked closer. You promised you'd figure this out. I said I would. When? He looked out the window. Soon. She sighed. I hate feeling like a secret. Daniel reached for her hand. Just for a moment. I know. Neither of them realized someone was walking past the office. The receptionist slowed slightly as she noticed the closed door. She couldn't hear the conversation, but through the narrow glass panel, she saw Daniel quickly let go of Vanessa's hand as footsteps approached. She frowned, then continued walking. That evening, Daniel arrived home carrying flowers. Amelia looked surprised. What's the occasion? He smiled. Do I need one? She accepted them. They're beautiful. I've been busy lately. You have. I know I haven't been around. She nodded. I thought maybe we could have dinner this weekend. Just us? Just us. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered inside her. I'd like that. I'll make reservations. He hugged her. It felt familiar, comforting, almost like old times. For one brief moment, Amelia wondered if she'd imagined everything. Maybe marriages simply went through difficult seasons. Maybe they could still find their way back to each other. She didn't know that less than an hour earlier, Daniel had stopped at a florist after leaving Vanessa's apartment. The flowers hadn't been bought out of guilt. They'd been bought to quiet his own conscience. Saturday evening arrived. Amelia wore the emerald green dress Daniel had given her on their 5th anniversary. When she came downstairs, he smiled. You look beautiful. So do you. During dinner, they laughed more than they had in months. They reminisced about their tiny first apartment, their honeymoon, Lily's first steps. For a while, it almost felt real. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again, then again. Finally, he glanced down. His face changed. I need to take this. Amelia reached across the table. Please don't. He looked at her. It's important. So are we. Silence stretched between them. For a moment she thought he might stay. Instead, he stood. I'll only be a minute. He walked outside the restaurant. Through the window, Amelia watched him answer the call. His voice was tense. He turned his back to the restaurant. He paced. Then, he smiled. Not the polite smile he'd been giving her lately. A genuine one. After nearly 10 minutes, he returned. Sorry. Everything okay? Just work. She looked directly into his eyes. You're lying. Daniel froze. What? You weren't talking to work. His expression hardened. I don't know why you've become so suspicious. Because nothing makes sense anymore. He leaned back in his chair. I'm getting tired of defending myself. I'm getting tired of asking questions. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Daniel reached for the bill. We should go. The drive home was silent. When they arrived, Amelia went upstairs first. She didn't cry. Not yet. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at her looked exhausted. Not from raising a family, not from keeping a home, from carrying a marriage that suddenly felt one-sided. She touched her own reflection lightly. You deserve the truth. The words surprised even her. Downstairs, Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't notice Amelia standing halfway down the staircase. She couldn't see the message, only the name. Vanessa. Her heart seemed to stop. Daniel looked around quickly, then typed a reply. A few seconds later, another message appeared. I miss you already. Amelia's fingers tightened around the banister. She couldn't breathe. She hadn't seen the entire conversation. She didn't need to. The hidden truth she'd feared for months had just begun revealing itself. And it was far more painful than she had imagined. Amelia remained frozen on the staircase. Her heart pounded so loudly, she was certain Daniel would hear it. He never looked up. His attention stayed fixed on the glowing screen in his hand. A moment later, another message appeared. Daniel smiled. Not the tired, distracted smile she'd grown used to. This one reached his eyes. He typed quickly, locked the phone, then slipped it into his pocket. Only then did he turn toward the stairs. Amelia stepped back just in time, pressing herself against the hallway wall. A second later, he walked upstairs. Amelia, he called. She took a slow breath before answering. I'm in the bedroom. When he entered, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, pretending to remove her earrings. You came upstairs quickly. I was tired. You okay? She looked at him. There was a time when she could read every emotion on his face. Now it felt like looking at a stranger wearing her husband's features. I'm fine. He nodded. Long day. He kissed the top of her head and disappeared into the bathroom. The sound of running water filled the room. Amelia stared at the closed bathroom door. She wanted to confront him. She wanted to demand the truth. Instead, she waited. Not because she was afraid, because something deep inside her whispered that she still didn't know enough. The following morning, Daniel left before sunrise again. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, Amelia sat at the dining table with a notebook. For years she had planned birthday parties, school schedules, household budgets. Today, she wrote something different. Facts. She drew a line down the middle of the page. On one side she wrote, what I know. On the other, what I think. She refused to confuse suspicion with truth. Under what I know, she wrote, Daniel has become emotionally distant. He hides conversations. Vanessa messages him outside work. He lies about some phone calls. Lily feels ignored. He becomes defensive whenever Vanessa is mentioned. Then she looked at the other column. What I think. There may be an affair. His family knows more than I do. Something has been happening for a long time. She closed the notebook. I need evidence. Not to destroy him. To protect herself. That afternoon, Daniel's mother called. Amelia. Hello, Margaret. I was wondering if you could help me with something. Of course. I'm hosting your father-in-law's birthday next weekend. I'd be happy to help. Oh, wonderful. There was a brief pause. And Daniel mentioned he might have to leave early because of work. Amelia frowned. He did? Yes. He didn't mention that to me. Margaret laughed lightly. Well, you know how busy successful men are. Amelia forced a smile. Yes. After hanging up, she checked the family calendar. Nothing. Daniel had never mentioned another work commitment. It was another small inconsistency, another piece that didn't fit. Later that week, Amelia decided to organize the home office. Most of it consisted of old files Daniel had brought home over the years. She wasn't searching for anything. She simply needed something to occupy her mind. As she sorted folders into neat piles, a business envelope slid from between two binders. Inside was a hotel receipt. A luxury hotel. 3 months earlier. 1 room. 2 nights. She stared at it. Maybe it had been for a conference. Maybe. Then she noticed something else. The conference Daniel had attended that week had only lasted 1 day. She remembered because Lily had counted the nights until he came home. 1, not 2. Amelia carefully placed the receipt back inside the envelope. Then she opened her notebook. Under what I know, she added, hotel stay lasted longer than the conference. She closed the notebook again. Still no conclusions. Only facts. Friday evening arrived. Daniel was unusually cheerful. I have exciting news. What is it? Amelia asked. We're celebrating the overseas expansion next month. That's wonderful. The board wants spouses there. Amelia smiled politely. I'll come. You'll love it. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, almost forced, as though he were trying very hard to convince both of them that everything was normal. The next morning, Amelia took Lily to the park. While Lily played on the swings, another mother sat beside her. I haven't seen you in ages. Amelia recognized her from Lily's school. Busy. Aren't we all? They watched the children for a while. Then the woman smiled. I think I saw your husband downtown on Wednesday. Amelia's heart skipped. Oh? At that little Italian cafe. She kept her voice steady. Probably a business lunch. Maybe. The woman shrugged. He was with a very elegant young woman. Amelia forced a smile. One of his colleagues. I'm sure. The conversation moved on. But Amelia barely heard another word. Wednesday. Daniel had told her he spent the entire afternoon in strategy meetings. Another lie. She didn't know why, but she knew it was one. That evening, Lily was coloring at the kitchen table. Mommy? Yes? Can I ask you something? Always. Why do grown-ups lie? Amelia looked up. What makes you ask that? Lily shrugged. My teacher says lying hurts people. Sometimes it does. Daddy told me he'd come to sports day. Amelia's stomach tightened. He forgot? He came after everyone went home. Lily smiled sadly. He said traffic. Amelia reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's tiny hand. Sometimes children accepted explanations because they didn't know they deserved better. Adults often did the same. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She opened her old laptop again. Instead of looking through old projects, she searched for online professional courses. Leadership. Financial analysis. Business consulting. She enrolled in one, then another. No one needed to know. If nothing happened, she'd simply be learning. If everything fell apart, she would need every skill she could reclaim. Across town, Daniel sat on Vanessa's apartment balcony. The city lights shimmered below. She rested her head against his shoulder. How much longer? He sighed. I don't know. You always say that. It's complicated. No. She looked at him. It's uncomfortable. He didn't answer. You love me. Silence. You do, don't you? Daniel finally nodded. Yes. And your wife? He closed his eyes. I care about Amelia. Care. Not love. Vanessa noticed the difference. So why stay? Daniel looked toward the skyline. Because leaving isn't as simple as walking away. He thought about Lily, the house, his reputation, his business, everything he stood to lose. He never mentioned the one thing that frightened him most, Amelia. Not because she was vindictive, because she knew more about his company than almost anyone alive. More than some of his own executives. He had spent years convincing himself she'd forgotten. He prayed he was right. The following Monday, Amelia was dusting the bookshelf in Daniel's study when she noticed something unusual. A framed photograph sat slightly crooked. She lifted it to straighten it. Behind it, a small key, taped carefully to the back of the frame. She frowned. Daniel wasn't the type to hide things. Or perhaps, he had become that type. She held the tiny brass key in her palm. It had no label, no clue, no explanation. Just a number engraved into the metal. 317. Amelia stared at it. What did it unlock? A drawer? A cabinet? A safety deposit box? Or something Daniel never intended her to find? She slipped the key into her pocket. For the first time in months, she wasn't just waiting for the truth. She had found the first piece of a hidden puzzle. Amelia turned the tiny brass key over in her hand. It was heavier than it looked. The number 317 was engraved so precisely that it seemed professionally marked, not something Daniel had scratched into it himself. She looked around the study. Everything appeared exactly as it always had. Books arranged by size. Awards displayed neatly on the shelves. A framed magazine cover featuring Daniel with the headline, "The Self-Made Visionary." She stared at those 3 words. Self-made. The phrase bothered her more now than it ever had before. She slipped the key into her pocket just as she heard the front door open. Daniel was home early. "Amelia?" "In here." He walked into the study carrying his laptop bag. "I wasn't expecting you to be in my office." She smiled naturally. "I was dusting." His eyes scanned the room. For just a fraction of a second, they settled on the photograph she'd moved. Then he looked back at her. "Looks nice." She watched him carefully. No panic, no questions. If he'd noticed the missing key, he didn't show it. That evening, Daniel stayed unusually close to his study. Every time he walked past the door, he glanced inside. Once, Amelia found him standing in front of the bookshelf. "Looking for something?" He turned quickly. "No. You seem distracted. Just thinking." She nodded. "So am I." For a brief moment, their eyes met. Neither of them blinked. It felt less like a marriage and more like 2 people quietly guarding separate secrets. The following morning, after Daniel and Lily had left, Amelia returned to the study. She locked the door behind her. The key rested on the desk. She examined every drawer. Nothing fit. She checked the filing cabinet. Still nothing. Then she noticed a small wooden cabinet built into the wall beneath the bookshelves. She had always assumed it was decorative. Hidden near the bottom was a tiny brass lock. Her heart raced. The key slid in perfectly. For a second she hesitated. Once she opened it, there would be no pretending everything was normal. She slowly turned the key. Click. The cabinet door opened. Inside was a black document case. Nothing else. She lifted it carefully and carried it to the desk. The combination lock wasn't secured. It opened immediately. Inside were neatly organized folders. Business contracts, investment records, insurance policies. Everything appeared ordinary, until she reached the final folder. Its label simply read, "Private." Her hands trembled slightly. She opened it. The first document made no sense. Property purchase agreement. A luxury apartment. Purchased 18 months earlier. Amelia frowned. They hadn't bought another property. Had they? She checked the address. She didn't recognize it. The owner listed on the paperwork wasn't Daniel. It was a company, one she'd never heard of. She kept reading. Monthly maintenance fees, furniture invoices, utility statements. Every payment came from the same company account. Not Daniel's personal account, not their family account. The company. A cold feeling settled over her. Why would a business own a furnished apartment? Before she could think further, her phone rang. She nearly dropped it. It was Sophia. "Hey, you sound strange. I've just been cleaning. You need a break." Amelia forced a laugh. "I probably do. I've got something interesting." "What? Our consulting opening?" "Yes. They filled it." "Oh, but..." Sophia smiled through the phone. "They're creating another position." "For who?" "They asked if you'd consider applying." Amelia looked down at the documents spread across the desk. "I don't know. You don't sound convinced. I have a lot happening." Sophia's voice softened. "Whatever you're facing, you don't have to tell me. Just remember something." "What?" "You were extraordinary before you became someone's wife." Tears filled Amelia's eyes. "Thank you." After ending the call, she remained seated in silence. How had she forgotten that? How had everyone else remembered, except her? She carefully returned every document exactly as she'd found it. The apartment paperwork stayed in her mind. It might have a perfectly reasonable explanation. It might, but she had learned something important. Daniel had been hiding more than text messages. He'd been hiding an entire part of his life. That Friday, Daniel's father celebrated his birthday. The entire family gathered at Margaret's house. Laughter filled the backyard. Children played near the garden. Relatives crowded around the barbecue. Amelia noticed Daniel checking his watch every few minutes. At precisely 3 o'clock, his phone vibrated. He stood immediately. "I need to step out." Margaret frowned. "So soon?" "Emergency meeting." His father sighed. "On my birthday? I'm sorry." Business again. Always business. Daniel kissed his parents goodbye, then turned to Amelia. "I shouldn't be long." She smiled politely. "Drive safely." He left. 5 minutes later, Daniel's sister approached Amelia. "You must be lonely." Amelia looked up. "What do you mean?" "Daniel is always working. He is busy." His sister shrugged. "I suppose that's the price of success." Another relative joined the conversation. "At least he provides well." Someone laughed. "Exactly. As long as the bills are paid." The conversation continued around her. No one asked how she felt. No one wondered what she'd given up. To them, her husband's income erased every sacrifice she'd ever made. An hour later, Amelia excused herself. "I'll be back in a few minutes." She walked toward her car, not because she planned to leave, because something inside her refused to ignore the feeling growing in her chest.